Enough screwing around. The Nicolution will not be televised. Yeah! Content warning. Blood, animal death and dismemberment, references to torture, and off-screen death. Reminder that this is a 16+ stream. You feel like you were finally starting to get a handle on this whole time travel thing. Sure, you pride yourself that you were no slouch before. I mean, it's not everyone who can bring themselves back again and again from repeated, brutal, horrifying, awful, distressing, traumatizing... Alright, okay, the adjectives are getting away from me there. Tate, stop it. You're already bleeding on your feet, stop it. Alright, the adjectives are getting away from me here. In any case, it's not everyone who can bring themselves back from failure to ensure the best and most friendful of outcomes. Still, since you became more consciously aware of those abilities, it's sometimes felt less like choosing a river and more like being one of those dead minnows that floats to the top, tangled in pond scum and at the mercy of the currents. Not anymore, though. You're not ocean debris, you're a salmon. A paper-white, spherical, friend-shaped salmon who's about to swim upstream of the Alpha timeline and spawn a whole hell of a lot of now where the fuck are you exactly? You take a moment to take stock of your surroundings. It appears to be a cave of some sort. Ooh, piano. I love soft piano pieces for the disciple. It appears to be a cave of some sort, with cavernous walls decorated with colors that, from your experience of Alternia, is as likely to be blood as paint. Perilous warning signs, but your encounter with the signless had carried more than a few valuable reminders about your purposes here. You wouldn't exactly call it a pep talk, but it had jarred you a little out of that existential funk. Well, judging by the fact that we're in a cave that has stuff on it and we're not near the clade... Oh yeah, no problem. These are also going to be archived on YouTube, so, I didn't stream the first 2 routes. I might go back and do that, so there are stream archives of that. I might do that with Clever, too. We're supposed to rehearse our StockCon panel today, lol. We do want, to have streams of these up so people can experience them for if you can't get them on your computer. What was I saying? Yeah, no, just, my predictions before Disciple shows up. We're not going to be seeing young die here. I think we're going to be seeing older die, but we'll see. Or we have a vague enough outline that I'm going to need to rehearse it so we don't veer into, discourse, if you will. Because we're both salty motherfuckers who will never have had an audience this large before, particularly not a Homestuck audience this large. Sorry, I'm eating another tray. Truth, relevance, and essentiality aside, you're lonely. Zing! You still need people, even if it's not in the same starved way you used to. My outline is probably detailed enough. I just need to make sure I speedrun what is asexuality to have enough time to talk about concrete examples. Yeah, especially since you don't want to assume any amount of base knowledge on that regard. This is like a 101 sort of panel. For people who are here and who are not aware, Janiyah Riley, who is Alt Universe Wash, has a variety of projects that they have been working on, but they are doing a panel on how to write aromantic and asexual characters at SockCon. It's going to be a little bit later in the day. Our panel on how to class spec non-Homestuck things is going to be tentatively right now pretty early in the con. But yeah, make sure you also check out their panel if you were not aware of it yet, because I am excited for that. Okay. Besides, you've done caves before. Painted caves, even. You and Azdaja made it out just fine with minimal Super Saiyan-esque antics. Emboldened by your status as experienced adventurer and friend maker, you decide to take a closer look at the art. Despite the rough settings, you're surprised at the level of detail on the paintings. The soot-black figures are stark and mysterious, and even in the dim light of the caverns, and make the color of their eyes and the clothes stand out even more vividly. You're no art critic, but in terms of contrasts, you give this a 10. I fucking called it, y'all. Mm. Some of these figures seem oddly familiar, although the one featured most frequently seems to be without a sign or very visible horns. You squint hard at the colors. A burgundy? Realization slides down your throat like ice, though, as you realize. Clearly, the artist lacked the materials to render the candy red of his blood and eyes, but there's no mistaking that hood, or the distinctive horns of the jade next to him. You start to walk quickly down the line, trying to take in as much of the story as you can. The two are eventually joined by an olive and goldblood, though you don't think you've met them or their descendants yet. The other members of the clade, then? Ah, so these routes can be played in either order. Okay. You begin to notice above all of them are words, seemingly clawed into the side of the cave walls. Your Alternian's been a bit rusty since you were de-scratched, but you can make out snatches of words. And if I speak of love to these, then who can say what the reaping of it will be? As you walk, you feel the cave closing tighter around you. You seem to be going further into the depths. The images shift, the olive, the gold, and the red entwined. Purple figures approach and drag them away, the jade kneeling. In indigo, their bow drawn taut. You feel tension rise up in your throat, and you break into a run towards the next mural. That love, once planted, will plant 1,000 more. Kindness flows as easily as blood, no matter the veins. You burst into a small grotto, finding yourself face to face with the largest mural yet. The signless, hands chained above his head. Diagonal lines of red slash across his dark torso, and the look on his face is one you've never seen on him before. Utter fury. There is more Alternians scratched in broad, brutal slashes on the walls beside it, but before you can begin to parse out what it says, your attention is suddenly caught by the figure in front of it. A troll stands up, hand dripping with dark liquid. They swipe a hand across the stone, adding more detail to the mural. You can't make out their face under the masses of thick, matted hair, but you can see peaks of olive on what remains of their clothes. After a moment, their hands drop to their sides. They stand, motionless before their work, so still and quiet that you can mistake them for a statue. Before you can consider what to do next, or even the possibility of a binary choice about it, the figure turns. Who are you? Well, now, that's a hell of a loaded question. You find yourself struggling for words, looking between her and the awful painting. You knew it hadn't ended well. In some less fortunate timeline, there was a version of you that had ended up in the Dolorosa's aftermath. But to see it rendered like this, after just talking to him, it feels more visceral, more raw. In the mural, he looked so angry, mouth pulled back to expose his teeth in an expression you could barely imagine on the cautious young man you'd met not a few weeks before. The one who'd promised that the world was ready for kindness and mercy. But it appears you delayed too long. She's approaching you now, slowly at first, but her hands are twitching in a way that makes her set of intimidatingly long claws particularly apparent. Get out. Should you explain? Maybe... Get out! Get out! Okay, decision made for you. You turn tail and run as fast as your legs can carry you. You hear the padding of footsteps behind you and begin to search desperately for an exit. There's no sunlight or moonlight that you can see, though, and the tunnels just seem to lead into more and more tunnels. Finally, you do what at this point seems like the most natural flight reflex. You reach out with your mind and wriggle around until you find a tear big enough to leap through. You're blinded by a flash of light and then find yourself suspended in the air. Panicked, you kick a bit as you begin to orient yourself to your new settings. You quickly realize your hoodie appears to be caught in a tree branch, suspending your little body above the ground. After struggling for a truly embarrassing amount of time to free the fabric manually, you give up and finally decide to just take it off and reckon with the consequences. You slip your arms out of the sleeves and stumble down to the stony earth, straight onto your ass. Fortunately, your ass is a veteran of such affairs and manages to land you in the patch of earth with the smallest amount of rocks and roots. You lay there, disoriented, before finally getting to your feet, dusting yourself off. Now, to grab the hoodie. You spend a few minutes jumping and groping at thin air, trying to catch hold of the sleeve, when your attention is very quickly arrested by a figure in the shadows, prowling across the clearing, nearly on all fours as she moves languidly across the grass. Oh god, has she followed you? You've never had somebody be able to do that before, but with the numbers of fractures in space-time— Oh shit, oh fuck, she's seen you! You dive into the bushes without a second thought, leaving the hoodie behind. The troll approaches the tree, but not the bush. Wait, is it possible she hadn't seen you? She seems taken with the hoodie, making loud sniffing noises. Well, 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 what do we have here? Oh no, what have we here? She seems less angry somehow than she was 5 minutes ago. The long claws you're only realizing now may be synthetic are stained in colors that are increasingly all too familiar. This kitty means business, and currently you are the memo at the top of her desk. She gently pulls the hoodie off the tree branch, examining it closely and taking a few big whiffs for good measure. Then her eyes latch onto the sign, and her slit-like pupils flare wide. Now, what's a Cerulean doing all the way out here? Fuck. Oh, fuck. Oh, fuck. Judging by the look on her face, your mistaken Cass isn't about to do you any favors. Still, there's no way you're going to remain unnoticed for long. What do you do? Choice time! Run! Or do as the cat girl does. Alright, y'all, do we want to run or do as the cat girl does? Taking a moment to have Aunt Cherry. Run is probably the bad end, yeah. Yeah, if you run, she will chase you. That's exciting. I'll let you choose your fate. Run. We're trying to do the bad ends first, but, we are guessing at which ones are the bad ends. Let us run. Well, why bother messing with an old standby? You roll to your feet in true ninja fashion and bolt, hoping for the briefest moment that you might catch her off guard long enough to get to another rip in time and have Aradia bail your ass out. Janaya, we have not begun the handmaid's route yet. Something you neglected to remember, however, is that big cats are predators. Their eyes are keyed towards motion, dipshit. In hindsight, if you really should have seen this one coming. I'm as parched fucking dead. Alright, let's do as the cat girl does. Look, you don't know this lady. In fact, you're fairly certain you haven't met her descendants either. But one thing's for sure. From the horns, to the eyes, to the inexplicable puns, she's every inch some kind of ancient precursor to a cat girl. Which means she will speak in 2020 cat girl Twitch streamer slang. No. If you've learned anything from your time with Wanshi, and a traumatizing read-through of Soldier Burbies, is that cat girls are suckers for one thing, and one thing only. Roleplay. Slowly, carefully, you crawl out of the bush, keeping your body in a crouch. She turns, eyes widening when she sees you and your posture. Still, she doesn't move to take you out, which you take as encouragement. In your best twinkle paw voice, fuck! In your best twinkle paw voice, you begin to tell her how sorry you are for intruding on a huntress's grounds. An unimaginable affront, but it was unavoidable as you find yourself in a desperate situation. Or dare you say, desperate. It is actually impossible that you could feel like more of a dumbass than you do in the brief silence, but at least you're not a dead dumbass. Her eyebrows shoot up high enough that they threaten to fly off her face entirely. Then, just when you're sure she's about to flex her hand and be done, her eyes narrow, the pupils thinning to lines, and she crouches down next to you, resting back on her haunches. Desperate. Desperate. Well, I suppose I could forgive the offense. If there's a tail to go along with it. For a second you blink, blindsided by the idea that your bullshit just worked. I mean, one of these days doing the first idiotic thing, or second, depending on if you made the other choice first, that pops into your head has gotta come back and bite you in the ass, right? Still, Apparently the universe isn't feeling your ass today. A lot of ass jokes in this one. Seizing upon the lifeline that she's tossed you, you begin to do what you do best. Spin. You tell your story as quick as you can, translating off the cuff into terms more suited for the genre. You tell her that you are currently on a roadside tour of history with the help of your friend, Bone Pelt. You have to check that with Aradia later. Pie. Aradia Warrior Cats roleplay. Now? No, okay, not now, but like, when? It's idiotic sounding, even to you, but her expression gives away nothing. At least until you run out of things to ramble about. I see. Well, in that case, I presume you'll be needing this back. She proffers the hoodie to you. For a moment, you just look at it, then look at her, half expecting it to be some kind of gotcha. Still, she doesn't look necessarily murderous, and this dialogue has gone on way too long to have it be the first bad end, so you take it gratefully. Fuck. After all, what's a warrior without their pelt? Her shoulders seem to shake for a moment. You tense, only to be hit by the loud, raspy noises of her laughter. Despite its suddenness, it's hard to not be a little swept up in it where her entire body moves with the laughter, letting it tumble her back to sit on the grass as she clutches her sides. You feel a couple chuckles escape despite yourself. Couldn't keep a straight face. After another moment, she wipes her eyes, taking a shuddering breath. Her head tilts as she regards you with an amused expression. Look at her little cat nose! Oh, she's a little kitty cat. Fuck. You should know, it's not easy to surprise me. So what's a hornless little wiggler like you doing in the outskirts? It's not exactly popular with tourists. Now that you're no longer cowering with fear, you find it hard not to notice how pleasant her voice is. It's soft and lilting with the faintest accent. There's a quiet quality to it as well, like she really isn't used to using it. God, this game is good. This game is quality. This game is inspiring. My skin is clear. My vegetable garden is watered. My dog is not chewing her paws. I'm not a Twitch affiliate, so I'm gonna take a fat rip. Okay. Now I will adjust my disciple voice. You're not exactly a tourist, you tell her. What then? Man, she is just 2 for 2 on questions with complicated answers. You scrounge around the corners of your mind for one that doesn't sound like the biggest heap of bullshit a bull ever did shit, when an 8-foot light bulb in the shape of a troll grinds that train of thought to a screeching halt. No! She fucking... Why is La Chancla Dolorosa in my fucking game? Okay. It's Kanaya's hut! The Dolorosa! Man, you've got to tone down the MILF quest. Wielding what appears to be a sandal as she charges out of the bushes, teeth bared. Your new friend looks back in confusion, and you nearly pop away in fear before the Jade's head catches up with her reflexes. She stops short. Minty, if you haven't seen the Dolorosa, now's an excellent time to look at the screen. She stops short. The footwear slowly drops to her side as her gaze lowers to your level, the rage fading into bewilderment, and, you flatter yourself, eventually morphing into an expression of pleasant surprise. Oh, good, okay, alright, okay, good. Just gonna look at Goblin's art for a bit again. Everybody love, care, and appreciate Glass Goblin. Glass Goblin is gonna have an artist alley at SOCCON. Chancla Dolorosa is a good thing that I'm very glad you made. She stops short. The footwear slowly drops to her side as her gaze... Nope, I already read that. It's you. Yep, that is certainly one way of referring to yourself. The Olive, who seems wholly unfazed by the Rainbow Drinker with deadly shoe game nearly rushing you, gets to her feet, brushing the dust off her legs. Rosa, perfect timing. I was only alone with them for 10 minutes before you rushed in to save the day. The Dolorosa, Miss Miriam? The Silence's hot mom? You really should have asked first names at some point. gives her a side-eye before dropping the shoe and slipping her foot back in. There's a slight smile twitching at the corners of her mouth regardless. I left my knife back at camp. I had to improvise. I'm sure you'd be just as formidable, Purim. The Dolorosa rolls her eyes. You didn't know the sprite was going to be used. I appreciate the attempts to soothe my stung pride, Legion, but the cat puns sort of reopen the wound. In any case, she turns her full attention back to you. What are you doing here? There's a slight pause before she amends, voice a bit gentler. Not that it's not good to see you, of course. My charge and I have been wondering when you would turn up again. Or, well, if. You know this mutant? They're a friend. That's another way of referring to yourself. And a better one, in your opinion. We've encountered them once or twice. The one who... She makes the same limp hand circle the Signless had used to indicate portals. The olive nods and the Dolorosa returns her attention to you. What have you been up to? That's a bit of a complicated answer. After leaving the Signless, you popped back in to check with Aradia on the next event you should visit. She seemed preoccupied, kept looking at certain cracks and muttering to herself. Ultimately, though, she told you to continue to follow your instincts, and you suppose it had led you here. You told the Dolorosa you've been hopping around a bit, trying to catch them, which is roughly true. Now, if she wouldn't mind, where and when exactly are you? It's been a few periges since he last saw you. As for where... The Olive, Legion. No titles, you guess? Maybe not every adult has one. You're still figuring the rules out. Chimes in. A few nights south of Thrashgut. She studies you curiously, a smile spreading across her face. It's a good smile, you think, excited and warm, like she really is happy to see you. Then her lips pull back to reveal a sharp set of fangs, and you wonder. So you're the traveler, then? It's good to meet you at last! Likewise, you tell her. It's not exactly a fib. Sure, you hadn't exactly known of her specifically, but it's not hard to work out she's one of the Clade members. One of the... how do you put it? A piece of his heart. Is there... oh, only her face changed, okay. The Dolorosa adjusts her clothes a bit. In any case, Huntress, are you perhaps hoping if you keep still long enough, the prey will come? So there is a title? You notice Legion's hands twitch ever so slightly, which has your heart in your throat, but her voice is even and light when she speaks. Sitting still would be better than scaring Moth Firefly. Ha, 'cause she glows, get it? But if you're getting hungry, then I suppose we can speed things along. She looks at you, the faintest light of mischief, or maybe more excitement, it's hard to say, in her eyes. There's a creek a little ways from here. You up for it? Is she inviting you on a fishing trip? Fishing minigame? No. There's a past version of you, a version driven by forces they never fully understood, who would swoon at the prospect. A fishing trip. A good old grounding fishing trip, with nothing to do but sit by the water, look out on the placid ripples, and talk about life? About girls? About growing up? You have fainted dead away. But you're a more mature person now. A person who nobly accepts the offer with only a couple of happy tears in their eyes. Are there any areas in Alternia that don't start with thrash? Yeah, the ones that start with thresh. Good! Well, if we're having another for dinner, I'd best go tell the others. I'll have things ready when you arrive. You wave goodbye and turn back to the Huntress, who's already disappearing into the trees. You trot after, huffing a bit as you try to keep up with her pace. Oh yeah, buff cat. She keeps stopping to sniff the air, which seems like an interesting tactic to... Can I see that without the... Is there a way to see it without the... Nope. Oh well. She keeps stopping to sniff the air, which seems like an interesting tactic to hunt down a stationary river, but then you're not the hunter here. They told me about a time-traveling alien. I must admit, I was expecting someone taller. Well, that's a new one. You say if it's any consolation, your height is pretty inconsistent. You'll have to wait for the next end card to see how it shakes out this time. The sound of running water cuts you off. Your experience with Alternian rivers has been less than ideal, but there seems to be a lack of murderous sea dwellers near this one. The water is clear and fast-moving, forming rapids a bit further down from where you are. Dark shapes wriggle and squirm in ways just off enough from earthfish to make you feel oddly queasy. MS Par's height is cutest in the room. You move to sit down at the bank's tail. You move to sit down at the banks, but Leijun wades right in. She looks back at you, head tilted a bit askance. Well? You'd kind of been hoping to avoid a dip in the freezing water, but shouting at her from the shoreline doesn't sound like the greatest conversation method. Sheepishly, you say something about poles, even as you roll up the bottom of your sweatshirt to try to minimize the soaking. It's easier when you put yourself in the meowdle of it, I promise. The water is about as warm as you'd expect from a mountain stream, which is to say, not fucking very. You wade out to about where she is, though the water hits you much higher than it does her. Now, look at her nose! Now, just keep still. Let them forget you're even here. Easier said than done. The current doesn't seem strong at first, but the gravel of the river bottom is loose, and the fish darting around you make it hard to focus on grounding yourself. Your arms flail wildly as you try to keep your balance, and finally she catches you by the hands. Easy. Pick a fish. Focus on it. Still teetering, you try to force yourself to look down. It's hard, for a minute, to look at any one fish. Little schools of them dart around your legs, and anytime your eyes latch onto one, another starts wiggling around. The spring-fed lake is warm, yeah. God, I was okay with colder water when I was a kid, but then I started taking tea, and my body temperature got higher, and I stopped being able to handle the cold as much, so that sucked. Finally, you pick one. Tail. Finally, you pick one, a round little fuck with a patch of lighter scales on the top that make it easier to keep track of. Watch its body language. Think only about its movements. What it's thinking about. What it'll go towards. Look at her little fucking... She's got... like... paw pads. Or calluses. They're probably calluses. You've tried to empathize with people of all makes and molds in your times on this planet. The fauna are a new one, but you try to do as she asks. Maybe it's all in your head, but as you focus with all your might, slowly everything around starts to fade out. It's just you and this little wiggling blob under the water. You watch it as it squirms between your fellows. As the huntress's hands slowly release your own, you remain steady on your feet, refusing to break your gaze. You realize it's doing a little hunting of its own, creeping up towards the water bugs hopping along the surface of the water. That's it. Just breathe, and when the moment is right... Look at her little hands. The smooth surface of the water is suddenly distorted, then just as quickly returns to normal. You hear a sudden wet slapping sound, and when you look up, you realize Leijun is holding a fish in her teeth. Splash. Cat girl. Right. Hard to tell past the wiggling trout, but you think she might be grinning at you. Either way, she tosses it onto the shore and looks back at the water. Seconds later, her hands have shot in again. It's a little unsettling to watch her snap them up with her jaws, but you find it hard to argue with the results. Some of the fish start to scatter, but it seems like she's too quick for them to catch on, if that makes sense. A small pile grows by the shore. That's so cute! You return your attention to your fish. It's swimming precariously close to your own legs, and you decide now is the moment. Buff cat, buff cat, buff cat, buff cat! You try to mimic her easy, fluid movements, almost casual. Like, no big deal, little buddy. Just a pair of legs sliding nearby you. Don't worry about it. It darts a little bit, but it doesn't seem to want to take its chances with her significantly more muscular calves either, so it doesn't go too far. You draw your hands back, waiting, waiting. And then, when you can't wait any longer, you pounce. Well, pounce is the wrong word. From the outside perspective, you have a feeling it looks more like a very aggressive belly flop. The icy water soaks the hoodie to your chest, and for a moment your head goes blank, muscles tensing all at once. Somehow, though, you retain control of your hand, and you feel your fingers close around something slimy and very frisky. Gripping as tight as you can, you try to haul yourself and your quarry out of the water. The rocks slide out from under your feet, and you find yourself toppling backwards, taking the fish with you. It sails in a perfect, graceful arc through the air, a thing of majesty, truly. Right up until it smacks into your fishing buddy's face. Fish have pink blood. Intriguing. She hisses, reflexively smacking at it. You scramble desperately to your feet and try to catch it. Miraculously, you manage, but you realize pretty quickly that it wasn't just her hand that hit the fish. As your hands close around its body, fish guts spill onto your hand. Oh wait, weren't the claws artificial? You try to maintain her grip on what has essentially become a bag of leaky viscera, failing to slow your momentum as you crash straight into Lation. I also wish she had the fish in her mouth. That would have been cute. But she got hit in the face with a fish, which is also funny. You both fall on a flailing pile of limbs, Lation trying to push you off without hurting you, and you trying to pin the fish between both of your bodies, all the while entrails are pouring everywhere. Well, you get the picture. It's about 20 minutes later, you're wringing out your hoodie over the river while Lation politely averts her eyes. Ultimately, neither of you are sure if you have anything that requires this degree of modesty, but still, it feels right. She already saw you without it, though. Okay, that's fair. Her attention is more caught by studiously dissecting the day's catch.
Well, crushing the fish to death wouldn't have been my first choice.
Fuck.
But it's effective enough, I suppose.
She's terrifyingly efficient at deboning them, which you suppose should make you nervous. Yet, you can't deny there's something calming about watching her work. You've wrung out your clothes as much as they can be wrung out. You pull it back on and flop down on the grass to keep watching. I can't get over how good this is. As she works, you realize her lips are moving. You ask her what she's saying. She smiles gently, glancing up.
Thanking them. They make good sport. They'll make better dinner, and I want them to know it won't be a waste.
Oh yeah, she's got green and red and yellow. That has no significance.
It's something my Lucis taught me.
It's an odd moment for this to strike you, but you guess you've never really put much thought into the process of Lucis to child education. At some point, food gathering responsibilities have to transfer over, you suppose. Your last two jaunts on Alternia, most trolls you knew provided for themselves via the drones, but this seemed to be significantly before Troll Amazon.
The training starts as soon as we've pupated. Can't exactly be dependent on them to feed us for the rest of our lives.
Well, most of us can't.
My red heart, he's still pretty hopeless.
She rolls her eyes, but there's transparent warmth in her tone, like there's a pride in his floundering. The signless, you say?
I mean, you've met him. Does he seem like the type? If we're near a city, he talks to vendors in a circle and we never have to worry. But out in the wilderness like this... I discovered Rosa had been doing most of the hunting. He's still getting the hang of it. And a good thing, too, since our last member joined us a week later and we had another mouth to feed.
That makes sense. The signless you met. Well, you wouldn't call him squeamish, not really, but him killing animals with his bare hands wasn't easy to picture. Unless he's changed pretty severely in the, what was it, past few months?
So, what he and Rosa told me, it's true? Time and space, you can just...
Words seem to fail her and she settles for snapping her fingers.
Like that?
Pretty much. God's least favorite anomaly, that's you.
It's not that I didn't believe them, it's just... a lot.
Yeah, that's more than fair, you think.
So...
Her hands are at a standstill now as she stares down at the fish.
Have you gone any further than this? Forward, I mean.
Well, sure. A lot further, actually. Centuries down the line. You start telling her about the strange troll disease known as the internet.
No, I meant... us further. Like,
She pauses for a long moment, searching for the words.
Further along in our timeline for Rosa, or him. Or, well, me? Do you have any idea how all this turns out? Because...
She finishes off the last fish and wipes her hands absently in the grass, fingers slowly creeping up to fidget with the thick, wiry strands of hair. She stares out over the water, expression slowly stilling.
Sometimes we talk, the three of us. Rosa too, but it's different with... In any case, we talk about what we're trying to accomplish.
Fuck off! God, okay. Alright, okay. I need to end the stream now, sorry guys. It's over now. No,
My red heart, he doesn't like to raise hopes too high. He talks about struggle, about incremental change. My gold heart, well, he indulges sometimes, but he's not exactly an optimist. I think he views this all as some kind of noble martyrdom. And don't mistake me, I know it'll be hard, the hardest thing any of us have done, but can all of this suffering really amount to so little? He's fought his whole life, Rosa too. I've seen his words move crowds. I've seen Teals lay down their arms at his feet. I've seen terrified Burgundies attack their masters to give us time to escape. So I guess what I'm wondering is, have you seen anything, any changes, even the small ones?
her eyes flick back to you.
How do we end up?
God, I really like that her pupils do actually change sizes in her sprite, too. She's a cat. She is a cat. You feel a pit of dread opening up in your stomach. God damn it. Somehow you always end up here. Or at least with these guys you seem to. Drawn back again to the same awful brink. She looks at you with an expression she is clearly struggling to keep neutral, but the tail behind her flicks and you swear her hair is puffing out a bit more. Bedraggled as she is by her dip in the river and hands covered in blood, she looks so much like her future self that you can't help but think of her. Alone, painting pictures of loved ones long gone.
Sorry, I suppose. I mean, can you even tell me something like that? Like, are there some kind of rules?
Well, no, you say carefully. There's not exactly rules, even if there were someone around to enforce them. Mostly, just an honor code, though you seem to have stretched it more than a few times. From everything you've experienced, however, the only consistent truth to this timeline is that there is one way for major events to turn out. All deviation will be wrenched back in service to the Alpha timeline.
Oh, okay, good. I mean, maybe good, or... Well, at least we can't break anything, right? So, do you know if any of this works?
You feel sick. You've confronted the heartbreak of inevitability with these guys before. You've seen them cycle between acceptance, defiance, and despair over it, watching them, powerless and sad, about to careen into destiny. But it's one thing to know it. It's another thing to tell someone directly to their face that everyone they love will suffer a horrible fate, that they will end up alone, reliving their worst moments in a cave forever. That their work may, through some chain of causality, reap benefits for someone else down the line, but that they themselves will end up a footnote in the history of their enemies. Somehow it had been easier with Rosa and the Signless. They had believed in the cause, but somehow you felt like telling them the ending wouldn't break them. Not really. Like they'd given themselves time to prepare for the inevitability of failure. Like they'd let that possibility sit in their mind, getting just comfortable enough that it wouldn't feel like a waste. The way she talks, though, she's a believer. In her eyes, her voice, the look on her face when she talks about him. And you think, no matter how strong she seems, that you don't want to be the one to find out how easily her heart can break. You look right into her hopeful eyes and try desperately to think of a lie when you're interrupted by a peal of thunder overhead. For a brief moment, you think, thank God, I've been saved by dramatic intervention. Then the startled look on Lesion's face reminds you that rain is just a temporary inconvenience. She hardly starts gathering up the results of your hunt.
We have to move now.
She starts struggling to hold on to all of the meat before she starts eyeing your spacious hoodie pockets with a worrying look in her eyes. It squishes against you as you run, but you'd still rather that than continue the previous conversation. You run as fast as your legs can carry you, with her closely on your tail, but the rain starts coming down in earnest. She does her best to shield you with her body, but she's still a low blood, and ultimately won't be able to take it much longer than you. She tugs you under a tree for a second's reprieve. Oh yeah, acid rain. Alternia is a hellscape that no one can escape from.
Camp is too far. We're going to have to improvise. There's a cave I know, not too much far from here. We should be able to make it. Normally you're not
one to argue with a lady with a plan. but something in her tone makes it sound like she's trying to convince herself, which isn't exactly inspiring confidence. Not to mention, caves mean isolation, and a long period where you have nothing to do but wait out the rain and talk to fill the silence. The last thing you want to do is tie up the last conversational thread. You open your eyes and cast around desperately for literally any other option, and miraculously enough, you find one. A tent, downhill from where you are. But you can't make out any identifiers, but the two trolls moving quickly to finish setting up are clothed from head to toe in olive. You've been around the troll block enough times to know that calling for help from strangers is asking for trouble, but these are lowbloods, like Lasian, and in your experience they tend to be a little less murderous. At least they're less likely to do it without provocation. Not to mention, they're definitely closer, and more importantly serve a vital distraction from any existential meltdowns. It's a risky gambit, but so is bolting to a cave you only might make it to. What do you do? Choice, 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 choice. Go for the tent. Follow her. Alright, y'all. I think following her is the bad ending, personally. We've got 9 people here. If anybody wants to weigh in on which route you think we should do, I'll let chat decide for a second. Because I want to see... Like, again, we're trying to aim for the bad route, but I don't know which one. Follow her. Okay. Hey, Pi. Hey, Pi, I just saw your, Twitter screen name, which is Leo Homicide. Or Homicide, but Psy. And I love it. I just want you to know. Meddling is not a good idea at times. Interesting. Yeah, you sure are, Sai sure is, or no, it's not Sai. MS Par sure is trying to avoid something that may, in fact, be inevitable. Let's follow her. In the end, the stakes of that gamble are too high. You pick up a fallen branch still covered in leaves and hold it over your head as a makeshift umbrella, gesturing to her like, after you. A faint smile twitches at the corner of her mouth. You should. It's a good living to be making. A faint smile twitches to the corner of her mouth, and she bounds out into the rain, dropping to all fours occasionally as you do your best to keep up. You notice she leads you in a far arc around the tents of the olives you spotted. You do eventually reach the cave, and wouldn't you know it, you manage to do it before you both melted into gooey slop. Still, as you shuffle over the threshold, you can't say you're in the best shape of your life. Your body hurts pretty much everywhere, and there's a faint barbecue smell that you think might be you. Having your entire body in absolute agony like this takes you back. It's nostalgic, honestly. Man. When did the ground get that close? The good news is it's pretty hard to feel your flesh being eaten away when you're unconscious. That's another solution to that problem. The bad news is it hurts just as bad when you wake up. You're lying on a stony floor with Lasian hovering over you. She's carefully rashing out small portions of soper from the patch at her hip and spreading it over the worst of your burns on your arms and legs. Aww. You groan at the pressure on your wounds.
Easy. This'll take the sting out in a few minutes.
You blink hard, fighting to remain awake as she carefully applies the balm. It's hard when your consciousness seems to be doing its best to split off from whatever the hell your body is doing right now. I have finished the cherries. Over the dull roar of your own pain, though, you hear a deep, scratchy sound. At first you think it's distant thunder, but it's too close. Growling? Then it clicks. Purring. Fuck! Lasian is purring! She catches you staring, and her cheeks tinge green.
Sorry. My Lucis used to do it to calm me down. Old habit.
She's a cat! You tell her it's nice, and she smiles to herself as she finishes spreading the last of the soper.
Good. Unfortunately, that's the last of our stock I can spur. Spur! Best I can do now is help you keep it clean.
She starts tearing strips from her sleeves and the cuffs of her leggings using them as makeshift bandages. It still hurts like hell, but you're at least able to think a little straighter. You flex your hand experimentally and thank her.
Don't mention it. If I could, I'd head back into the woods. There's some leaves where if you chew them up and spit them perfectly in the meowth of the burn victim.
You appreciate the author, but you think this'll do. She snorts, muttering something that sounds suspiciously like, your loss, but turns to look at your surroundings instead.
Well, at least the view won't be boring while we wait.
Despite your recent experiences with caves, you have to agree. The stalactites glitter eerily and the ripples of the river sound almost haunting as they echo off the cave walls. Something about this place feels almost otherworldly.
I've spent a lot of time in caves. Too much, I think.
Well then, boy, are you glad she seemed to have dropped the topic of her future? You feel another stab of guilt, but she continues talking without encouragement.
After my Lucis died, well, she taught me as much as she could. I didn't have to worry about feeding myself, and if predators came by, then I could usually handle them. But 6 sweeps is still young to be on your own in a place like this. Caves are the safest option. Usually. Sometimes they were bears.
6 sweeps, roughly the age of Aradia's friends. You tried to imagine Karkat or Tavros or Kanaya trying to make it on their own. You guess Terezi kind of had, but Terezi was, well, a lot of things, but definitely a special case. The exact role of a Lucis seemed to vary as much as the role of a parent does on Earth, and sometimes it was hard to determine who was taking care of whom. Some kids, like Vrska, would probably even be better off without one. But still, to be that young and to have absolutely no one, not even the protection afforded by higher blood. Doesn't sound like it could have been easy. She seems a little embarrassed and takes a sudden interest in picking some dried blood out of her claws.
Well, thank you, but it's really okay. Or, not okay, but I don't know that fair really factored into it. And that I don't really ever expected it to be fair. I don't think anyone does. That's part of the problem. It was just the reality. I was on my own, and I had to make my way.
She makes a humming noise that might be some kind of mirthless chuckle.
There was a time, when I was younger and fiercer, when I was proud of it. It made me strong, and didn't give me any excuses. I had to grow, or I'd die. I was right and wrong, I suppose. But no matter how strong I told myself I was, it was still a long time before I was ready to leave those caves. And then, I had to realize people were much harder than prey.
There's something lonely in her voice, in her eyes. You've seen it before, in Zebedee during your first call, and Lanira at the coffee shop, surrounded by people she was afraid to know. If you were honest, you heard it sometimes in your own voice. That some sort of emptiness that doesn't go away in a crowded room. The sense that everyone else got some kind of message you missed, that you were too hopelessly far behind to catch up. So, how do you go from recovering hermit to low-blood activist? There go her hands again, tugging at her hair lightly, pulling as if to tease the thoughts from her head one by one.
That's a long tale. Not always a nice one either. I wasn't the best person. Even that's being generous, honestly. But he says it helps to forgive. People were hard after all that time on my own. There were smells, sounds, words I didn't understand. More of it every day I spent in civilization. I knew the language, of course. I could communicate with people. But trading, bartering, jobs, all that was nearly gibberish to me. I hadn't had anyone to teach me, and it felt like I'd arrived too late to learn just by watching. It was overwhelming. Sometimes I thought I'd go crazy. But I realized I could make them respect me.
She pauses, like she's gathering the words to say next. You realize now it's a habit of hers, like she has to practice what she'll say a little before she lets it out. You give her the time she needs. Idly, you toss a pebble or two into the pool, trying to see if you can make them skip.
I was strong, and I wasn't afraid of the forest, even near dawn. Those were valuable skills to have, especially when you get into richer areas. At first it was just animals, the occasional loose-eye smuggler, but eventually I worked my way up to more discreet services.
She seems hesitant to explain. You give her a nod. Like, yeah, you're a hip kid. Some of your best friends have been mercenaries, and you have the horrible nightmares to prove it. No, you're a hip kid. Down with the slang for mercenaries these days. Some of your best friends have been mercenaries, and you have the horrible nightmares to prove it.
It was just a job. Just survival. The same as I'd always done. But at a certain point, I think
She plucks at her sleeves now, nervously.
things got complicated. I think I was starting to like being feared because it meant I was safe. It was perverse. It was wrong. But I didn't know any other way to be. Or maybe I did, but I just wouldn't let myself. It made me important to people somehow. Like inference that I couldn't be thrown out, as long as I was a part of everything. But all that changed when I met them.
She rolls to her feet, picking up one of the flatter stones you miss and tosses it. It bounces 4 or 5 times across the surface of the lake before ricocheting into the wall opposite. It was a contract.
It was a contract. I was supposed to take him into custody, but I listened to him first. What he said that day wasn't like anything I'd ever heard. Yeah, you have to imagine open speakers on behalf of Lowblood rights aren't exactly a dime a dozen on Alternia.
Oh, yeah, you have to imagine open speakers on behalf of Lowblood rights aren't exactly a dime a dozen on Alternia. Belasian is shaking her head emphatically.
That I'd heard before. Not as openly as he preached it, of course, but if you get any litter of disillusioned lowbloods in the same room without a high blood nearby, they'd say the same.
Which character?
I didn't need someone to tell me I was a person. I knew that. Deep down, every lowblood knows that.
At first this surprises you. Should it, you wonder? You think back on your experience. Sure, there'd been the occasional sellout, a Fozzer, or a Vicare, a lowblood who bought in, or pretended to buy in, possibly out of some misguided sense that this was the best they could hope for. But yeah, most lowbloods had been pretty aware of their situation. So, what was different about him? Her hands are bright now, and she started to pace a bit as her hands gestured. Her tail swishes back and forth, in great danger of flicking you if you didn't lean back.
I never heard anyone describe being a person like that. The idea that we weren't just owed air in our lungs, that the issue wasn't a natural order of strength, or too many drones, or the tensions between low, mid, and high, but something wrong with the fundamental way we saw ourselves as a species. That the reason we continue to hurt like this is because we saw ourselves as inherently designed to be either hurt or hurting. That our refusal to be more was a result of fear and tradition, not biology.
Fuck.
What kept us down was our fear of punishment and our belief that we had a limited number of people we could care for, that we needed to start separating our own castes into allies, enemies, and victims until the Highbloods didn't need to do anything to let us break down. I followed him after the sermon, asked him what the fuck he thought he was doing, if he was drunk, or broken, or I didn't know what. Something had to be done. I wanted any reason to tell my client not to worry. He looked me right in the eye, and he told me, I'm telling them they're allowed to love, that the troll disease called friendship isn't a disease at all, and that their ability to pity is a sign of functioning eyes, not dysfunctioning will.
Damn! Rephrasing the joke phrase, troll disease called friendship, into something that is baked into Alturian society, specifically to rip apart the different caste systems, and then refuting that via the signless. Thanks, Distantquest. Good fucking game. She stops. You realize you've been holding your breath. The excitement, you'll admit, is a little infectious. So, what happened? Her face splits into a grin. You have clearly arrived at the good part. What she's saying sounds an awful lot like Vriska, enjoying being feared because it means she's safe, but also not. Vriska changing upon meaning the humans, having to kill to survive. Reader mentioned her before all that, so maybe that was the point. Yeah, like, that... Like, there is a direct comparison here to be made about, like... It's not that Vriska doesn't have the chance to grow, and it's not that the Disciple didn't have the chance to grow, it's that neither of them considered another option until they met other people who could have changed their minds. Really, really good character shit,
I laughed in his face! But I followed him that night too, and the night after. Listened in on conversations. He didn't talk to everyone, Just the ones he thought might listen. I tried to pick out a pattern, but there was none. He didn't pick them for any reason beyond that they looked like they might be ready for what he had to say. It was the same in his sermons. People would bring friends, quadrants, coworkers, anyone they could find, because they looked like they might need him as much as he needed them, and he welcomed anyone who'd listen. She looks you right in the eyes now, like she's just handed you a gift and is waiting to hear your response. Can you even understand how bizarre that is in a place like this? Not the strongest, the quietest, the craftiest. No shows of loyalty demanded beyond a handshake at the start. Just whoever needed it, to listen, to be listened to, no questions asked. I followed them to the next town, and the next. He probably would have let me keep it up, but Rosa told me to make up my mind. In a way I already had. Everything changed that week. Everything. I knew there was no way to go back. To pretend I hadn't heard him. Watching her talk, it's incredibly bittersweet in all the best and worst ways. There's also a difference. The disciple did go on a different path because she was offered the choice and she chose to listen. Vriska did listen, and pre-retcon we see her take it to heart eventually, but post hasn't had that moment yet. Yeah, that's a lot of what I take issue with regarding Vriska's character development. It's not that I take issue with the fact that a less developed Vriska was required for plot development, because that is interesting. I did like that. What's disappointing is that she never re-achieved that spot. She never got to the point where she might go back and apologize to that other version of her and denounce the younger version of herself. I don't think we'll ever actually see that particular moment, but like that would be an interesting way of juxtaposing it. I need water. Also, I do want to do the bad end, but I think that'll be a little bit shorter than this one because we are on 2.5 hours now. What you doing on the bed, babe? Oh, laying down, okay. Alright. Watching her talk, it's incredibly bittersweet in all the best and worst ways. The light in her eyes when she talks about this idea of personhood, of unconditional care and acceptance is... moving is the wrong word. Moving implies a level of externality that you don't have to the situation. She makes you want to believe, not just in the sense of intellectual agreement, but that kind of evangelistic fervor that makes you pin people down in streets because life can't go on until they know. But there's a sadness there too, colored by the outcome, by where this truth takes you. I knew what I had to do then. He hates it when I call it my calling, but I knew it then as certain as I'd ever known anything. I needed to make sure other people got the chance. She reaches into the satchel at her side and pulls something out, pressing a small letter-bound book into your hands. You open it to find the pages covered in cramped Alternian writing, so small and close together that you can only just make the words out, like whoever was writing was making as much effective use of the space as possible. Occasionally, you'd find small sketches cramped in the corners, usually of the signless, sometimes Rosa and Sai. I started writing everything down. Every sermon, every place we've been, what we've seen, everything. It's frisky, I'll admit, keeping a record of like this around. If something happens to us, it has to live on. It has to keep going, keep reaching people. This is the only way I know how. The way she says it, so matter of fact. She says if, but something about her tone says when something happens. She's preserving, you realize, because she knows better than anyone how easy it is to wipe it all out, how quickly someone's words can die with them. You start to read, squinting your eyes a bit to pick through the dense forest of text. It's the Silence's voice, distinctly so, but as you read, you find bits of her in there as well. Not exactly editing, nothing that sounds like something he wouldn't say, but like something building off the spirit of his words, tacking on embellishment and elaborating where they had space to do so. You intended to stop after a few sentences, but you find your eyes slide to the next page, and the next, as your head starts to churn. What are you doing here? It's a question you tried to answer for yourself shortly before arriving. Whatever constraints exist over this timeline, if Aradia is meant to be believed, they will prevent you from making meaningful change. There is no world in which you can ensure the Silence's rebellion succeeds in their lifetime. And you won't kid yourself into thinking this is straightforwardly about friendship either.
Yeah, Mulin was a mage. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to talk about character development in Homestuck 2 because it's not a finished work and I don't know if it's going to be a finished work. But yeah, Mulin was a mage of heart. This is about understanding. From everything Tizias has told you, so little is understood about them. So little is preserved. How'd she put it? Wiped nice in fuchsia? So this is your role. To understand. Because by God, someone should. You realize, looking down at this, that this is why Tizias knew. This is why anyone knew. Because someone had meticulously preserved it, ensured its persistence long past the point of reason, demanded its essentiality when no place was made for it. The mere existence of this thing in your hands is so courageous it makes you want to cry. And yet, you look back at Leishan, finally. She's watching you with that sort of eagerness you get when you're showing someone something you know they'll enjoy, and you think about how unfair it is that this is all that will survive. This woman is a story herself. A good one, you think, but it won't be told. And before you can stop yourself, you blurt this out. You ask her if she's really okay with this, committing her life's work to furthering someone else's goals, because that strikes you as potentially an extension of old habits, of letting other people's wishes overtake hers for some sense of belonging. They're noble goals, certainly, goals you share. You're certainly not going to be the asshole out here arguing some both sides shit about Clown Church and Low Blood Rebellion. But is she okay with this being the only thing left behind? Is she okay with the memory of her being just the function of something far bigger than any individual she cares about? And could she really stand to lose everything to it? This does seem to be the disciple picking her aspect in class. Also, I want to say, like, both sides shit about Clown Church and Low Blood Rebellion seems like interesting foreshadowing towards the routes with the higher bloods descendants. All of that spills out of your mouth and into the still air between you, and you feel no better at the end of it. It's impossible that this wasn't a spoiler, that she didn't pick up from the genuine despair in your tone, that you've seen how this all ends, and it's not well. Demanded its essentiality. I cannot wait until Riff gets to talk about this game at SOCCON. I'm not even sure if that angle is going to come up, but it's so good, and I ogle the writing in admiration. Yeah, no, that was also a really good line. Like, we know that the ancestors, and specifically these four characters and the Signless's story, are important to the existence, like, the later ancestors, the existence of the younger Alternian trolls, and the Hive Swap trolls that come in between. So, like, we know that it is essential, but Mulin first, before anyone else, is the person who demands that this story be taken seriously. Dolorosa was the first person to care about the Signless. The Psionic was wasn't the first person to protect the Signless, but was the first person to kind of make that his only deal. Protecting the Signless, not just raising him, and not just loving him, but protecting him. And the Disciple was the first person to say this, the people we can touch cannot be the only people who hear this. I'm enjoying chat. Okay. You stare down at the book in your lap and wonder if there's even enough left in your stomach to vomit. The silence stretches on, unbearably long. And then finally, you feel an arm wrap around your shoulders. You are being squeezed tight into her side. When you finally dare look up at her, her face is calm. Happy and warm, even. The kind that reaches down to the tips of your toes.
It does come off like that, doesn't it? I know my red heart worries about it. Like you wouldn't believe, honestly. Talks my ears off about it.
Her hand strokes your arm gently, and you are suddenly fighting back tears. How long has it been since someone has touched you this gently?
I've always known how this might end. Always. But as hard as it is to believe, it's my choice. Lowbloods, they rarely have a legacy. For a very, very long time, I worried mine would be one of destruction. Of my hunting prowess, of my ability to hunt. Even that would only last as long as people who knew me were still around. But this...
She reaches over and taps the book in your lap.
This is going to survive. This is going to outlast all of us, no matter what I have to do to ensure it. So that someday, someone like me, who is lost and angry and scared, will get the chance to see that there is always a choice. That trolls are capable of being more, and that they are more than they've been shaped to be. And if enough people know that, and really act on it, maybe there's a chance.
So, you know who... We were talking about Vriska, but do you know who does this before anybody else is Red Glare and Mindfang both learn the Signless's story and choose to act differently because of it. Mindfang joins the Summoner, like, presumably not only because, like, she's fated to be with the Summoner and knows it, not only because she, like, wants to join in that revolution, but because the Summoner's revolution was one that was directly based on the Signless's teachings, and so she must have had to read them. And we know Red Glare liked the Signless because we get an explicit panel of her holding up the Signless necklace. So, like, yeah, again, the Disciple does purposefully engineer the essentiality of the Signless's story, creating perpetuation? Yeah, creating the perpetuation of the Signless's self in the future. Yeah, Lee, I think you're right. I think you're very right there. I like that a lot. That she's definitely a Mage of Heart. Knowing somebody for your own reasons, and making it known for your own reasons. Fucking neato. Outside, the rain is slowly coming down to a drizzle, and she gives your shoulder one last squeeze before letting go.
Not everyone will understand. Like I said, it has to wait for someone who needs it, who is ready to hear. But despite the clods, he's convinced me people are worth it, and there's no putting that away. So I choose this. I choose a legacy as a disciple. I choose to make sure that message reaches everyone who needs it, even long after we're gone. As long as that happens, it doesn't matter whose voice is dictating. Because it's still me, my choice, my memory, for everyone who's quick enough to look.
You think about this as the rain slowly dries up, and peaks of moonlight slip through the thick blanket of violet clouds. You're about to speak when you hear footsteps approaching. For a moment, you both tense, but when a hooded figure enters the mouth of the cave, that fear evaporates. Mulin! The Signless, out of breath, though noticeably unmelted. The hood must be rainproof. You give an awkward wave, but you aren't where his gaze is right now. Legion is already running towards him by the time he's crossed the threshold, but he's halfway to meet her. His hands can't seem to decide what to do with themselves, clutching her arms, cupping her face, pushing her hair back like he's trying to figure out if anything's missing. For once, he's at a loss for words. The storm, I thought, and you didn't come back to camp, and well, obviously you solved it, but... Him stumbling over his words is comically out of character, you think, but you think very sweet. She seems to think so too, and carefully tugs the hood back, giving his shaggy head a gentle tussle.
And so of course you wandered out here to save me from a force of nature, something definitely in your power to do. My hero.
She presses a gentle kiss to his forehead, and two just under his eyes. A grin splits his face, making the worried lines around his eyes seem to dissolve. It was worth a shot. I'm glad you're okay. You are sure you're okay, right? She gives an exasperated sigh and tugs his ear. He laughs, batting her hand away. All right. At long last, he seems to notice you. He doesn't seem embarrassed exactly, nor does he let go of her, but unless you're mistaken, his cheekbones are looking a little on the red side. It's good to see you again, my friend. In, arguably, circumstances of less mortal peril.
They're a little cooked. I did what I could, but they'll need another coat of soaper when we get back to camp.
That's fine. Sai came back shortly before the storm with enough to replenish our stocks for a little while longer. He also said to tell you he got the pencils. Legion smiles. It's just a second, but you think Sai may have stopped breathing. Outside, the rain has finally come to a stop. She peers up at the clouds, sniffing the air a few times.
We should give it a bit to be safe, but it'll probably be safe to leave soon.
You're only realizing now how bone tired you are. It's been a long day with a lot of things you're still honestly unsure about. You're still not sure if it's fair, or if you can make your peace with it, even if she has. But as you watch the way she keeps her hand in his when she leans out of the mouth of the cave, moonlight spilling over the two of them, you wonder if she might not at least have a point. Fair might not factor into it. What matters is what they can make out of what they have. It's not exactly a happy feeling, but it's a warmer one by far. Making up your mind, you struggle to your feet. In the process, the fish, long forgotten, slides out of your hoodie pocket onto the cave floor with a truly unappetizing splat. The couple looks over you, and Silas looks bewildered between you and your spilled cargo. Should I even ask? She comes over to you, examining the pile of squashed meat and sighing.
We might as well cook this before we leave. Make do.
She looks back at you and frowns a bit, dusting off your front a bit uselessly.
Your pelt is looking a little worse for wear, though, little warrior.
Yeah, you have to admit circumstances aren't great. You have a pretty good system with this hoodie. It has a knack for repairing itself, through means you don't totally understand. Something to do with the void resetting all your properties. But between the trees, the river, acid, and carrying a pile of dead sea critter around all day, it's in one of the worst states you've seen it. You start to tell her not to worry about it when she stands up and walks over to the signless, holding out a hand. He looks confused for a moment, but then looks at you and seems to understand. He takes off his cloak and passes it to her. Before you can process the pantsuit situation, she's tucking it carefully around your shoulders and pulling the hood up over your head, giving you a wide grin.
Try this on for size. It's weatherproof, and it might help with the hornless situation, in case you end up in the circumstances of mortal peril again.
You look down at yourself. It's a little bigger on you than on the signless, and it's not exactly your style, but it's warm and practical, something that's really true for your outfit choices. You still have nightmares about the cape bikini. You look at signless, but... like, are you cool with me jacking your style? But he just smiles. I have others. It suits. You push the hood back a bit and thank both of them. Legion smiles and gives you a friendly rub on the head.
Good. Now, we need to get a fire going. We've got hungry kittens back at camp. You up for it?
That warmth hasn't gone away. It's not the soaring highs you used to get, that sensation when someone you genuinely want to know invites you into their life as though it's the most natural thing ever. But it still hits. As you look between them, you think you understand her. There is so much good in these two, so much good in their work, the signless and his disciple, and all their reckless caring. And no matter how impossible the world they dream of is, you can't help but want to hear about it, at least for a little longer. So at least the knowledge of it survives with you. So you know what? Yeah, you are up for it. Victory! Alright, now we have to go back and do the bad one! Really stretchy. Oops. No, don't want that. Sorry, I'm just taking a little break to catch up on things. One of my friends is having some good thoughts about this game in a server. It's John. It's Janaya. I don't want to share it because it's in a secret server. But I'm just reading. I'm catching up on back chat. Also, like, yeah, sorry, I just typed this out. New England is chock fucking full of reenactment museums. Like, I was referencing one, and Janaya referenced another, and I know that there are more, because we referenced 2 separate ones. There's also, like... Oh god, I don't know. Alright, okay. Let's do this last one, because I wanna, I also have work to do, Janaya. What do we say? Go for the tent is the bad one. What about those guys, you say, pointing Legion in the direction? She frowns a bit.
Well,
It's not outright rejection, and as one large drop breaks the leaf canopy and splashes near your feet, that's pretty much all you need. Also, yes, love does continue to be the most powerful force in Homestuck, send tweet. Tugging your hood up, you make tracks in the direction of the tent, leaving her no choice but to follow. One of the 2 olives has already entered the tent. The other is tying down the last pole, hissing faintly. His hand is burned by the rain. His head turns to see you barreling towards him. Hey, what the hell are you? His voice slowly dies in his throat as you get closer, but you realize he's not looking at you. The footsteps behind you slow before coming to a stop, and you dare look back. Legion has stopped dead, and though it's hard to tell through the downpour, you think she might have gone pale. Huntress? Several incomprehensible emotions pass over Legion's face, and when she finally responds, her voice is oddly strangled.
oh, Minar. Been a while.
He rubs hard at his eyes, like he can barely believe what he's seeing. He looks a few times between you and her, and finally pulls aside the tent flap. You and your weird friend better get inside. You step carefully over the threshold and look encouragingly over your shoulder at Legion. After a second's hesitation, she scowls and follows you in. The other olive is startled by your entrance and opens their mouth to speak before she enters behind you.
Holy hells!
The other one, Ominar, steps in just after her. Look what the Purbeast dragged in, eh?
Hello, Denal. Where the fuck have you been?
Denal gets up, sweeping her into a tight hug. Legion accepts it about as gracefully as a plank, but eventually gives them a light pat on the back before they set her down.
Oh, you know, busy. For a very long time.
Despite her clear comfort and the Imperial symbols on the walls, it seems doubtful that these 2 are going to attack you. You set yourself down on a chair before anyone can tell you otherwise. Too long. Haven't seen you since those riots at Gristleshank. Yeah, see, that one doesn't start with Thresh, it starts with Gristle. What the hell have you been up to?
Well...
Her hands fidget nervously, and you realize quickly that no matter how friendly these guys might be, trying to unionize lowbloods probably won't go off well. Rather than leave her to flounder, like a good friend, you'd step in to divert the attention. You ask them how they know Legion. Her eyes widen and she starts making frantic motions with her head, but the other 2 turn their attention on you.
Man, where the hell did you drag up this mutant?
Coal bait if I've ever seen it. Ouch. You try to smooth over that, though, explaining you're a visitor who's been...
helping me with...
Her face settles into a subtle grimace, barely there if you're not the sort to obsessively track the emotions in the faces of those you are trying desperately to befriend.
work.
This, apparently, is the right answer, as Denal and Ominar's faces split into grins with a few too many teeth for your liking. Well, count yourself lucky, then. Denal pats her shoulder, not seeming to notice how she tenses under it.
You're working with the best there ever was.
Right, the best at... hunting? Ominar laughs. Right, hunting. So what is it this time? Heard a couple of batteries got loose from a cell block near here.
Or maybe something a little less mundane? Come on, give us something. We've been on the road for a few periges and it's so fucking boring out here.
Oh. You're getting the impression you had a different kind of hunting in mind. Still, you try your best to reserve judgment. Alternia is rough, and Legion is hardly the first assassin you've met. It's not exactly nice work, but you've been in this particular glass house one too many times to start throwing stones now. So they're all mercenaries then? Former partners, maybe? Denal snorts dismissively at the idea.
Sure, we've collaborated on our, particular skill sets a few times, but we're not exactly on her level, you know?
I mean, once the Grand High Blood himself gives you... your endorsement. Not like you need to fuck around with us little folks anymore, right? He elbows her in the ribs in a way that's clearly meant to be jovial. Leijin does her best to laugh it off, but it's weak. She's wringing her hands together now.
Yes, well, all that was a long, long time ago.
She's looking at you when she says it, something in her eyes pleading with you, possibly to leave. At the rate it's coming down now, though, it'd melt both of you to puddles in an instant. Not that long ago, come on. Remember that time in Scourge Scrub? There is nothing left of that cool confidence she had by the river. She looks like she's seriously considering whether or not to take her chances with the weather. Two things make themselves apparent to you very quickly, though. One, there's no out from this tent that you both could survive. Even if you could handle the rain, these two would only come after you, confused and probably a little suspicious. Two, if one of you didn't start to sound more convincingly enthused about trading war stories, chances are they would start to suspect you anyways. So you grit your teeth, take a deep breath, and say, "What about that time in Scourge Scrub?"
She seriously hasn't told you this story? Huntress, modest isn't a good look on you. I'd better make some tea. This is a long one.
What follows are probably the longest few hours of your life. Story after story of death, destruction, interrogation, and torture. A legislacerator trying to smuggle prisoners of the church out. Criminals strung from trees and left to the wildlife until they decided whatever was waiting for them in jail was better than their current fate. Information extracted slowly, painfully from a violet, leading to the destruction of a group of malcontents. Vagrant jades assassinated or brought to justice. Ominar and Denal should write a book with their attention to detail. You could almost imagine finding it entertaining if the main character weren't sitting in the room with you, growing quieter and quieter with each passing moment. All the while, the Huntress hasn't spoken without prompting once. She's answered questions in terms of the bare facts, but mostly she's just stared at her tea. The other two barely seem to notice, caught up in the fervor of their own respect for these actions. You can hardly blame them. Sounds like she was good at her job. A little too good for your own comfort. Again, you aren't sure how much you can judge her. You've seen firsthand with Polypa and Connell. For a lot of olives, there isn't much else to do to feed yourself. What's more, it's clear this is a part of her past she regrets, that alongside the Silas and Rose's endorsement has to count for something. But as Denal belabors the gory details, you can't help but feel your insides twist.
The High-Blood laughed so hard when you brought in her head, I thought he was going to piss himself.
Leijin smiles wanly.
That's not saying much. He's usually laughing.
Still, I don't care what anyone else says. That was the moment you became his left hand. You know, they still say no low-blood ever got deeper into their inner circles than you. Familiarity perks up your brain as you finally find something in your frame of reference, beyond, general familiarity with the concept of violence. Maybe you're out from the tour de force of Leijin's rep sheet. Clown Church, and the Grand High Blood. So they hire assassins?
From time to time. Sometimes you need something a little more subtle than a subjugulator, or you can't afford to associate the church with it. They're not terribly picky, as long as you're discreet. Still, she was always his favorite, probably because you were kind of a believer yourself. Still got that book of mime hymns?
She bristles and squeezes the cup tight enough that it groans ominously.
It wasn't...
Ominar and Denal seem startled, and she catches herself, taking a deep breath.
Things change. It was a phase, but I'm not as devout as I used to be.
She sips her tea, which must be ice cold. For a long moment, the room is silent. Things change. Right. His tone is icy, which makes you start to tense. The rain pours insistently outside. The Huntress doesn't look up, even as Ominar gets to his feet. You've changed too, Nobody's heard a word from you in almost 2 sweeps. Somebody started a rumor you died. She takes another sip, still not looking up. What was the last job you took before you left? Something about a jade and a loudmouth mutant. What happens next happens very fast. In a blink of an eye, she's on her feet, hand locking around his throat. Ominar barely has time to gasp before she whirls him around and shoves him out the tent flap as hard as she can. She keeps her arm outside the flap, holding him there until he starts to scream. Denal is dazed by the abrupt upheaval of circumstances, but eventually seems to recover themselves. They get to their feet and reach to pull a knife from their belt.
What the fuck are you?
The huntress draws her arm back in and lunges at them, snarling. You're frozen in place as you watch her strike at their head again and again until their body lays still. You can't tell if they're unconscious or if... She doesn't get off of them, body hunched over their prone form like a predator about to devour their hard-fought meal. Her shoulders heave as she breathes, head sinking down so you can't see her face under piles of hair. I know it is nice parallels to Kurlos, especially because, like, Kurlos manipulated Mulan a lot. So, of course, Kurlos here would also manipulate Mulan. There was probably a fair amount of deprogramming that had to go on if there was some Chuckle Voodoos involved. That sucks. Outside, Ominar's screaming gradually fades away. You kind of doubt it's because he found shelter. For a long, terrible moment, all there is the sound... All there is the sound of your own heartbeat.
Why didn't you listen?
The huntress gets to her feet slowly, shakily, before turning to you with eyes filled with hate.
All of this could have been avoided if you just listened. We could have found a cave and now if there was somebody they were supposed to report to, they're gonna come looking. More people who knew me are gonna come looking for them.
Her voice breaks near the end because she has to duck her head to hide her face. She reaches a hand up to rub at her eyes and you almost feel like you need to look away. Your face feels hot with shame. Meekly, you try to apologize, but her expression is just as angry when she finally looks back up.
Rosa said you were a meddler. She has no idea how much. But I swore a long time ago, this part of my past will never, ever hurt my Clade again.
She reaches out to you, and you think for a second to help you up, but she grips the front of your hoodie and looks you dead in the eyes.
I'm leaving. If you know what's good for you, don't follow me. Signless will ask questions, and these are answers you don't deserve to give him. If we see you again, then we see you. I won't pretend I can keep you from him forever. But I won't forget this. I won't forgive it either.
She lets go of you, extends her claws, and slashes a large strip out of the wall opposite you, draping it over herself like a blanket. She shoots you one last hate-filled look before diving out into the night. You sit there quietly, regret filling your heart as you wait for the end card, and fear as you realize there's no way to avoid the coming conversation after all. Damn. Well, didn't mean to do the fucking good end first, but goddamn, that was good. That was some good shit. Alright, we've been streaming for 3 hours now. Thanks for the people who stuck out the whole thing with me. That was both routes. I hope that we can do this again when it, like, just fucking immediately after it drops again, because I hate getting spoiled on these things. So, yeah. I've been Bucky. This has been Distantquest, which you can find at distantpast.itch.io, and I believe it's also DistantPast on Twitter. Let me double check here. Do we have links to twits? Yes. Nope, Distantquest on Twitter. It is distantquest.tumblr.com. You can join their Discord if you go to their itch.io page, or potentially their or their Twitter. The link to the Discord is on their itch and on their Twitter. I guess we'll find out which ones are next soon. But oh yeah, no, wait, no, we gotta do credits. Fuck, I can't stop that. I can't end the stream without doing credits. Okay, Distantquest. We are on version 69 of Distantquest. This game is a work of love. To find out more about each person, click their names to be linked to their internet profiles. Thank you. Our mods and organizers are Leonardo Regalado, aka Pie Shark, the director who is in our chat right now. Thank you for joining us. Glass Goblin, Deco Noir, Pie wrote the prologue, C, or only Dolorosa, wrote the Dolorosa, Robin, or Rhythmic Idealist, who is here, wrote the Signless, and those are previous routes that I would like to go back and play. Then House of Sugar wrote the Psionic, and Riff wrote Disciple. Oh, it's fine that you're late. I'm gonna put, wait, more drops tomorrow? Fuck, okay. Cool. I wasn't expecting that. What was I about to say? My brain just melted. What was I saying? Yes, oh yeah, I want to record and go back and do the other routes. Pie Shark did Aradia and the Psionic. We saw Psionic this time, we didn't see Aradia, but we saw the Dolorosa by Glass Goblin, we saw the Signless by Raspberry Sheep, and we saw the Disciple by Salty. Background artist, Pie Shark did the prologue. Jas, or Hipster Soul Gushers, did a bunch of backgrounds, and Pie Shark did one for the Psionic, so it looks like... Oh, and Birdie Sleeps also did the back... It looks like they're the background artists. FX and extras are by Jas and Pie Shark. Ending illustrations are by Pie Shark, and for the routes we saw were by Pie Shark, and Deco Noir did some for the Signless. Musicians, for the Dolorosa, Darling You're Free was by Articulately Composed, who is also going to have a panel at SockCon, I believe. A lot of these artists are going to be in the Artist Alley at SockCon or have panels at SockCon, so, like, SockCon hype. Oh, the whole game drops tomorrow. We're on a daily update schedule. Okay. Alright, okay. Oh, to lead up to SockCon. Okay. I assume to lead up to SockCon. For Signless, Dreams of a Better Future was composed and mastered by Rainy, and the live guitar was done by TV, because there was a really fucking good guitar track in the Signless route. Fuck, I'm excited to play that live. The Psionic song was called Laika, and is by Rainy. The Disciple had Disciple's Cave, Through the Crack in Time, Calm Before the Rain, Stories of the Huntress, and Life in Caves. I did hear a bunch of tracks in this route, and that was good. Those are by Jake Gamelin. And our programmers were Pie Shark for the UI, the Prologue, the Dolorosa, Signless, and Disciple, and Invalid Cards, looks like, helped with the programming for Dolorosa and did the programming for the Signless. This was made by RenPy version 7.3.606. This programming contains free software under a number of licenses, including the MIT license and the new Lesser General Public License. A complete list of software, including links to full source code, can be found here. I assume that goes to the... Oh, it's jokes. It's all jokes. Oh, fucking sorry. Yeah. Yeah, that would be cool. I was gonna say, that's a fast update schedule. Yeah, okay, it's all jokes. Yeah, we have Secret Project that's going to be announced at SockCon, and I want to finish it before we drop it, but I think we're going to be waiting a decent amount of time in between releases. That was credits. Yeah, that was credits. I have seen some Homestuck streamers in the past do, like, dig into the source code. I think it'd be fun to, like, go troll through code and stuff, but we've been going for 3 hours, and I don't want to do that right now. Maybe I'll do that on future streams. Also, I kind of want to get permission to do that first and ask about that. Anyway, thanks for coming to Distantquest. We will see you guys at SockCon on Saturday. Smell you later.